Good evening. Welcome to Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sarver. I'm an employment law and business law attorney and founder of the law office of Eric M. Sarver. And I host this video podcast and talk radio show every Tuesday night at 5 p.m. right here on Talk Radio NYC, where I have guests and we discuss some of the challenges around employment, basically employment law, business law, and other issues that people face during the pandemic, particularly business owners, employers, as well as employees and individuals who might be pursuing career changes and so forth. And so in that light, I am very pleased to have back a special encore presentation of my guest, Maureen Weisner. Maureen, welcome to the show. Oh, I think you might be muted, Maureen. I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that to, if you could unmute. Sorry
There
about
we
that, I should
go.
have mentioned.
No problem. My error. I was so engrossed with the music, and I said, "Oh, I was spacing out there for a moment." So yes, Eric, thank you for inviting me back. It's a pleasure to be here. I had a wonderful time when we spoke previously, and I hope I can contribute for information for your audience today.
Wonderful. Oh, I think I have no doubt that the information will be helpful and valuable as it was in the past. And that brings me to our introduction, followed by the topic. So Maureen Weisner is a Master of Education, also a PCC and CPCC. She is the co-founder and managing partner of the boutique career consulting firm and Kickstart Your Transition, whose specialty includes helping individuals in or approaching transition, typically involving career change, divorce, and education, and other work-life events. Maureen Weisner is a certified professional coach, a seminar leader, a speaker, and author, and has been recognized as a top 10 executive coach by Women's Business of Boston. Maureen's extensive business knowledge integrates a broad depth of experience from corporate sales, training, education, and small business ownership, which she brings to her clients. And so I wanted to give you that proper introduction, Maureen. Welcome once again
Well,
to the
thank
show.
you, Eric. Always nice to hear. You have to track back when you think about, for all of us, how far we've come. Look at you having an anniversary in the practice of law. How wonderful is that? And how you've pivoted and done other things. It's extraordinary for many of us. When we do that look back, we see how far we've come. But when you're halfway up the mountain and you look back and you say, I don't know if I'm still scared or if I'm going to continue to go. But there's distance between the beginning and where you are, wherever that is. So always good to be moving forward, always important to be upskilling, always important to be learning, being curious, and so forth.
Absolutely, Maureen. Absolutely. And thank you for that, that kudos. LinkedIn reminded me that April 16th actually will be 20 years since I opened the doors to my practice. Back then I was mostly doing the plaintiff side, employment, labor rights, and civil rights litigation, immigration appeals. And as Maureen mentioned, I did pivot in towards the business owner and management side sometime around 2012 or 13. So the journey always changes. It's always interesting. And as I heard you say, Maureen, we're looking back when you're in the middle of some uphill climb, it's amazing to look back and see where things come.
Yes,
So
it
thank you for
absolutely
that.
is. When you
And
think about being on the chairlift, I don't know if you're a skier at all, Eric, but you're halfway up the mountain. You think, oh my goodness, I'd hate to be hiking up there right now. But somehow you get to that next space and you take a deep breath, and then you get to the next space, and it's incremental. And when we add habits and continue your climb and continue to be curious and continue to learn and continue to network, it takes us to different places, different introductions. Our new networks can expand and make us very different. And we can segue into that afterwards for just a brief profile on one of our clients who just had an amazing experience and so unexpectedly so.
Mhm. Well, I definitely want to hear about that. And in terms of a segue, we can perhaps discuss the topic tonight. Great. And our topic is about professional presentation, pandemic style. Similar to what we did a couple months back with Maureen. Then the real subtopic here is around professional appearance and presentation, which have always been crucial factors for success. I think that's pretty much all can agree on that. How you convey your message, whether you're a candidate seeking a job or employment, whether you are a business owner, perhaps you're looking to pitch to investors or looking to speak before a room of colleagues or with a client. All very important to have good presentation skills and practices. And with the pandemic, we have all seen a change, or at least many of us have, from the in-person to the virtual. And there are changes in terms of how we put on our best appearance over Zoom or in a two-dimensional world. So now with things transitioning back to a hybrid scenario, what is often happening from what I'm hearing from colleagues and clients is that there is now a dual anxiety. There's anxiety they have of putting on their appearance on Zoom or WebEx or Teams, but also that we've all been kind of out of practice. You know, we've been home, many of us, or virtual for over a year now. So to be back in an actual three-dimensional space, to be standing before a colleague, you know, where suddenly you're not just a figure on the screen from the chest up, right? You actually are standing there all, you know, present. You know, people actually have feet again. And so it's an unusual, it's readjusting. And so how do we put on our best appearance? And that's what Maureen will share her insights and observations about this evening in part. So, Maureen, I thought if you can just tell us a bit more about yourself, like where did you start your career and how were you inspired to inform Kickstart your transition?
You know, when you look back and you see how many pivots you take and whether they're
Mhm.
anticipated or whether they're forced, there's causation with all of the steps that you take. And so I'd always, as we discussed before, I'd always imagined being a classroom teacher. It was very important to me. I'd been called to that. I enjoyed working as camp counselor in the summer. And I felt that all of the teachers that I had in the New York City public school at the time, and this is growing up in Queens at a time when women in particular were in teaching positions who could have been CEOs of companies quite easily. So we had some of the best and the brightest, and we were incredibly fortunate to have teachers as role models. So that's something that I always wanted to do, and I was inspired by teachers who pushed us to be the very best. Unfortunately, there were no teaching jobs at the time I graduated. So what do? Well, you have to work. So you can enroll in a master's program because in New York City, you needed to have a master's within 5 years. And so you kind of go the traditional route. And I took other jobs, federal government, private industry, relocated to Philadelphia. I was just telling Emily about that. And what was that like? Suddenly you're in a new place and you're there for a reason. My fiance at the time was in his residency. And so what do? You find other jobs. So it was retail and then other private teaching. And we moved to the greater Boston area and again started up, no teaching jobs again until I was offered one. But at the same time, I was offered a position at a major airline and took that because it sounded interesting, sounded like it was an opportunity. So what do you do with that? Well, you take those skills of teaching and training, and now you can employ those skills in a sales operation. And did that for a while, left there, went to art school, opened two businesses, finished another master's and another master's in leadership when I was called to coaching. Read about someone who was doing it, sounded like it was a really good fit for me, pursued that, did all the training that I needed to do in leadership and group training and so forth, went to California to do that and finished up. And it's been wonderful. Finally, I collaborated. So I was working independently, and then I collaborated with someone I'd worked with at Delta Airlines for a number of years, and we bring a different package to the table, which is exciting. We have been together for over 7 years working with clients. And as I mentioned before, we can work because we are industry agnostic and we have always been remote, that we, unless I'm speaking, we can be anywhere. So we can work with clients anywhere, and it's exciting, from West Coast to Israel and everything in between. It's so fulfilling to be able to make a difference. And Eric, as you know, when you work with clients and there's a result, when somebody is moving forward, when they had a goal, or you can help them apply a strategic plan, it's very exciting and very rewarding.
Absolutely, Maureen. Yes. I mean, and I imagine that all the different areas you're in, different industries, from retail to the airlines, teaching in different states that you lived in, I think that all contributes to the wealth of experience contributes what we have to offer our clients, different perspectives we can see. I would just imagine how invaluable that would be to you as a coach and as someone who can help people transition through
Having the
different areas
experience of,
to know
you're
that have
absolutely
the
right, Eric, having the experience of being in an environment that may not be the best fit, where you're not feeling inspired, where you know that there's something else. So how can you achieve that pivot? How can you move towards something else? I think what we've touched on is being curious. and like yourself, moving from one part of the law to other parts of the law in a different business setting and radio, what piques your curiosity? Who's tapping on your shoulder to say, this is something to pay attention to? And when the tapping gets harder and harder, and you say, wait a second, I really do need to stop and pay attention to something else. So where does that path lead me? And for many clients will say, this can be the bridge opportunity. This can be the one-off. This can be doesn't mean that your contract is for life. It doesn't mean that it's a death sentence. It doesn't mean that it has to be forever. There can be opportunity here. And if you're not feeling particularly inspired, what can you be inspired about? What can you learn? How can you add to your professional profile, to your CV, to your resume? How can that make you more employable going forward? And how can that open up other doors with introductions? Very often, we've had clients who have been consultants for large organizations. And as one of them said, the only person that lives in my condominium is my cat because I'm a road warrior. Not so true right now, but that's what she had been doing for a number of years. And in process, learned about so many businesses, so many opportunities where she did not want to be in the future, where she could imagine herself being. And of course, one of those clients ultimately recruited her. So that wasn't really her intention to begin with. She expected that she was going to learn a lot and stay with the company in a different role, but found that, wait, here's something else. So let me pay attention to it. So the tapping on her shoulder made her pay further attention, and she was able to pivot.
Hmm. And I think that's such an important thing, the concept of pivoting. I mean, I know for me, I feel very comfortable in my role as an attorney, but the pandemic, COVID-19, uh, caused me to give really pause and consider the ways that I present, because I was doing a lot of in-person presentations and workshops and panels and discussions. And it's nice to go to a place and you're in front of a small audience, but when COVID hit, we all had to find new ways to be out there. Well, how do I, I'm reaching connect with my clients and
Whoa, how do
prospective
I
clients and
say?
my colleagues. And suddenly, and so through a series of inquiries to video and radio and such, found a way to actually, I'll put in a plug for Talk Radio NYC, which has been a really great station to host this video podcast and to host the show that goes with it. And I think what you said about the pivot and the bridge and such, just really important, like in these times for other people listening, because whether you're a business owner or maybe you've been laid off and applying for new jobs, and with this pandemic comes change and a lot of starts and stops and a lot of economic twists and turns. And so people might be going into sort of a bridge situation. Maybe it's a business that's taking on a new type of service that they never did before. Maybe it's an employee who's looking for jobs. To your point, maybe they're not in their field of banking. Maybe they're doing something completely different, which might turn into an opportunity that they never thought of before. So I think those are all really good points to inspire our audience. If you're out there and you're unsure what's happening with your business, or if you're in between jobs, to just trust that whatever you do, it's not a waste of time. It's not, even if it's not your dream goal, dream job.
Well, it's true. When people talk about their dream job, the advice generally is, things aren't always the way they seem, and what you can pull out of it and how you can contribute is just as important as what you're getting from something. So how does that make you an author in the future? How does that prepare you for another industry? How does that take you from this place of curiosity? How can you make the best effort wherever you are with learning? But once we stagnate, and it's unsettling for people right now to be out of their comfort zone, just as you say. If you go to the supermarket, you'll see people now who have almost crossed through this invisible barrier where they're in pajamas and they're out in some ways where you think you wouldn't go to the mailbox like that a year and a half ago. Now, suddenly you're in public because there is this work-life integration that suddenly has become so integrated that people can't differentiate. One thing that I did learn, and we talked about this before, is that credibility is at the top of the list. So wherever you are, credibility is important. And if you think about the statistics, and this is on a post-it that I keep on my desk, 55% means that people judge you by the way, how you look, 38% is how you sound, and only 7% is what you say. So when we think about presence,
And, mhm. I'm sorry, Brina, forgive me. On that note, we're a little over our commercial break time. I thought that might be a good segue.
Good
I didn't mean
segue.
to interrupt you there, but just wanted to make sure we get to our
We'll pick up.
sponsors. So yeah, so on that good note, let's circle back to that after the commercials. You're listening to Employment Law Today with my guest, Maureen Weisner. I'm Eric Sarver. Stick around. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you interested in having a better relationship with yourself, others, and God? Greetings. I'm your host, Dr. George Andow, for the show A Journey Through into Awareness. On my show, we journey into the awareness that the mind of God is the true seat of our personal consciousness. We join together each Monday at 7 p.m., so tune in on Talk Radio NYC.
Did you know that nearly 1 in 5 adults in the U.S. battles mental illness? Hi, my name is Albert Daba. I'm the host of the show Extra Innings. Extra Innings, I discuss the topics of wellness, mental health, and the experience of surviving multiple suicides within my family. Listen live every Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern to Extra Innings for discussions with sports figures, artists, mental health professionals, many others. That's Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
Hi, I'm Graham Dobbin. Join me every Thursday evening for the Mind Behind Leadership here on talkradio.nyc. We speak to people from business, sport, military, and politics, all around what makes a great leader. The personal experiences of what's worked and, maybe more importantly, what hasn't worked. So that's 7 o'clock every Thursday evening, the Mind Behind Leadership here on talkradio.nyc. Listen to real stories of real leaders.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Welcome back to Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sarver, here with my guest tonight, Maureen Weisner, co-founder of Kickstart Your Transition. And we're talking about this topic of professional presentation, particularly now and during the pandemic. And so before the commercial break, Maureen was describing some observations around the pandemic. And I think two interesting points that you made, Maureen. One, about how people are sort of blending their at-home and work sort of appearance, for lack of a better term, whereas people were going out in, say, pajamas, sweatpants that they might not have done 13 months ago, but because they're so used to being home, it's hard to sort of shift gears and get dressed up for work. And that was something I heard you say to some extent, and also talking about this, the reason why it's so important to have a good appearance. As you know, Maureen, you mentioned that interesting, I think it was that statistic around how like 55% of what you say, I think, is based on looks, if I wrote correctly, and 38% of how you sound, and then 7% the actual content. So I wanted to ask you maybe a follow-up question about that. During the pandemic, I was wondering, what has been your approach, your philosophy in helping employees and business owners with their professional image during the pandemic?
Well, I think you raised a number of good points, Erica. I think one is that there's a lot of anxiety now for people who are in this hybrid situation where not everyone is, if you've been working from home, you've been either very casual, and we talk about this, don't slouch on the couch. you need to be upright. And in fact, there's a dress manufacturer, it's called the nap dress. And she's been doing millions in business. And this is to the extent that it's so casual, you can wear this, appear that, from the waist up, you're somewhat professional, and then you can sort of tip over and take a nap. So there's this real sense of being, are you working, or are you at home? And for many people, the distinction has blurred so dramatically that getting back to a work presence. And now I just read a statistic that the average American has gained 29 pounds during COVID. So that means that getting back into work clothes is going to be an issue. That means, are you uncomfortable with your appearance, and what do you need to do about it? Fortunately, the weather is changing. So for those of us in the Northeast, we can be outside. But there's a lot of anxiety about this, working from home in particular, and how did those people settle into having a background that makes sense, looking professional, not moving. And we talked about this previously. If you're somebody who, and we had one client who likes to sit on a rollerball, and that's how she does her work. And we said, well, that's wonderful, and that's very good for your back, I assume, but it's very distracting if you're talking to clients or employees or you're interviewing. So when you're in process, it's important to take notice of what's in front of you, how you appear. You don't have to look like you walked off their cover of a magazine, but grooming makes a difference. We don't want to look like we rolled out of bed. We want to look like we're prepared, because again, the exterior is very much a reflection of the interior. When everything looks like you just jumped out of the clothes dryer, it's impactful in a way that it's delivering a message that you probably don't want to deliver.
And I imagine this must have been a really big issue for you and your clients. Again, be they candidates for jobs, be they business owners who might be looking to polish their appearance when they put on presentations, or when they meet with clients, or when they have investors. I imagine during the pandemic, because I think a lot of things you just said, Maureen, that I heard you talk about, people might be more mindful of those different aspects, how they dress, how they look, their posture is proper, are their clothes freshly dry cleaned or ironed. When we were all commuting and working and showing up places, I have some clients who are in the dry cleaning business, and they were very busy until last year. Now they hardly get any customers because people are working from home or laid off or working in sweatpants, or not, they put on a button shirt for an hour and then take it off and wear a t-shirt. So I think it's interesting to note that these image tips around like dress, appearance, what I hear, tell me if I'm wrong, but is that these might not be so much new aspects of presentation, but they become they've fallen off people's direct conscious radar because we're so used to being at home and sort of phoning it in, literally, sometimes on phone calls instead of in person.
And absolutely, well said, Eric. And if you have children at home who have not been back in school full time, and you may have a partner who is also working from home, the dynamics of being in that situation are very challenging. You've got a lot of overlap. You don't have the distance. The space is not available. People don't have that sense of privacy and where they can compartmentalize much more easily. But getting back to my client on the rollerball, what we said to her was, sit in a chair, something that has 4 legs. So even though that seems very logical, that's her level of comfort. And for people who like to spin, it's the same thing. We want to be stationary. We want to be able to look at the camera. We don't want to look down. We don't want to look up. We want to make sure that your laptop is at a level that makes sense. You want to practice. Mock interviews are important. Practicing with a friend, with a family member. All of these things are important when it comes to interviewing, when it comes to making a presentation. We've forgotten what it takes if we're not brainstorming in an environment where we're one-on-one, where we're in a large group, where we're now selling differently, where we're interacting differently. We make these incremental adjustments and we're not so aware of it, but when we are, it makes a huge difference. Our voice, intonation, whether you slow down, whether you pause, whether you think you have to answer every question immediately, or you can take that question in, pause, consider it, and then process. But as an eye opener, eye contact, very important, Derek. We know if we're looking at the camera, it's different than gazing up or gazing left or right, because it doesn't inform the person or persons that you're on a call with. And imagine you're on a call with 30 people and you've got a screen full. You know how many people they turn their video off or they're looking at something else. You know that they're not attending to what you're saying, and you can check out. So how do you remain attentive? How do you remain focused? Well, the important part, I think, is preparation. And we've talked about this, Eric. Preparation, preparation, preparation. One important person that I love to quote, and we talked about this a little bit, Amy Cuddy, and she is the TED Talk person. She's written a wonderful book. It's Present, Bringing Your Boldest Self to Your Biggest Challenge. So she talks about the influence of the body and how we take in our power in that way. So 2 points. One is that when we're anxious, cortisol levels increase exponentially and testosterone levels decrease. Now, we don't want to say that this is gender bias, but let's park that for a second and say, how can we feel more comfortable? How can we feel more powerful? When we are in person for an interview, it's very important, from the person who you greet at the reception desk, if there's an elevator, people are observing you. If it's a small building, they see you when you come out of your car, perhaps. And it doesn't mean that you're under a microscope, but it does mean that getting yourself together and prepared, if you have the opportunity now to be in person, is really important. You can do the power pose that Amy Cuddy talks about, which is similar to a yoga pose, but it's arms up and your feet planted firmly. If you have the opportunity to do it beforehand, get into a restroom, close the stall door, and do it. Practice. Always a good thing. Now, here's another great tip. I love this. I always use these when I travel. They're little mini toothbrushes, and people minimize this. So instead of breath mints, which can or cannot work, you want to make sure that when you're in a restroom and it's possible, you can check out what your appearance is, take care of that, whether you've eaten beforehand and so forth. You want to make sure that you greet the person who's near security, who's at the elevator, the receptionist properly, that you have your resume, that you have a hard copy of your resume, if this is an opportunity for in-person. If it's not in person, you can still make sure that you're properly groomed and that you're pausing, that you're speaking slowly, that you take a breath, that these are all eye openers for us individually and how we interact with clients, potential buyers, potential clients, prospective employers. We meet people every day, all day, whether it's on a Zoom call or in person, whether you're getting gas at the local gas station, whether you're at the supermarket, we're always meeting someone.
Yes, really true, Maureen. I think, and what you're saying is really helpful to note in light of the fact that we are transitioning in this pandemic back, at least in many sectors of the industry that I've seen in industries, we're sort of segueing more into an in-person scenario situation. People are going back into the offices. People are meeting with investors in person as opposed to over Zoom, but we still have some sort of a remote hybrid presence here. So really the point I think is well taken about how when people are in public, going into an in-person meeting, we may have forgotten that we are being observed when we're in the waiting room. We are being observed when we're at the elevator. And I want to come back to those points. We have to stop for a commercial break in just a moment. So I will say that you are, if you're watching at home tonight or listening, you're listening to Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sarver. I'm here with my special encore guest because she was truly so enlightening, and I mean this sincerely. A couple months back, I wanted to bring you back for this transition period. Maureen Weisner from Kickstart Your Transition. So everyone just stick around. We'll be right back with more from Maureen.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
Do you run or are ready to open your own business? Hi, I'm Jeremiah Fox. I've been operating and opening small business for the last 25 years, and I'm the host of the new show, The Entrepreneurial Web. Tune in every Friday at noon Eastern Time for insights and stories on the nuances of running small business right here on Fridays at noon, talkradio.nyc.
Hi, I am Joseph Franklin McElroy, host of the new podcast, Wise Content Creates Wealth. It airs on talkradio.nyc every Friday afternoon from 1 p.m. to 2. They say content is king. Well, wise content rules the world. Every episode features tools and tips for content marketing and business people telling the wise content stories of that success. Tune in every Friday from 1 p.m. to 2 on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to Employment Law Today. I am your host, Eric Sarver, from the law office of Eric M. Sarver, and I'm an employment law business law attorney that does this podcast every Tuesday night at 5 p.m. So if you like what you're hearing and you're a business owner or entrepreneur and you want to learn more about how to survive and thrive in this pandemic, tune in Tuesdays at 5 p.m. to Talk Radio NYC. So Maureen, an interesting point when we left off, and I think it goes maybe hand in hand with your earlier point about preparation being king, preparation, review, practice. You talked about mock interviews, and I can see how that would be great for candidates. And I can also see how a mock practice run, whether it's I'm giving a pitch to an investor, or like I'm an attorney, so practicing an opening statement or closing arguments, or points for an arbitration to make, or in those type of situations can be really helpful. And I'm wondering, when you do mock interviews with your clients, are there any things that have jumped out at your clients as the most surprising? Like, I didn't see that, or, oh, I realized this is something I need to work on, or?
Well, it's interesting that you point that out, Eric, because people are continually surprised with what comes up, and you're thinking, wow, that's pretty basic. One thing is, don't wing it. Don't wing it. And do all of the research that you need to do about the company in advance. This is not the time to ask questions about the company. There may be something about a particular project that's interesting, or a route that they may be taking, or how do they measure up industry-wise in terms of what their next steps are and so forth. But these are all future kinds of comments, not tell me about how you operate. So it's preparation. And just to circle back to TED Talks in particular, TED Talks, 18 minutes. The best TED speakers practice 200 times. So that's just a small piece of how important it is. Definitely don't wing it. Have bullet points available. If this is a remote interview, the camera is in one place, but you have this sort of large bulletin board that you can put Post-its on around the periphery if necessary. So those can be your bullets. You can look at it, so that will key you into those important points that you might have missed. Most important in preparation for any interview is to script out stories. Stories are memorable. We are very, very, very in tune to what I recall about that person, and oh yes, that's right, that was related to something, and then I can again relate to something else. In mock interviews in particular, it's always a success story. Tell me about yourself. That's very, very broad. So we want to narrow that down. When we think about for a client to say, oh my goodness, tell me about myself, where do I start? You want to be prepared with that. No one cares about your moment of birth. You're thinking about a wonderful success story that you had at the last organization where you worked. Something that really taps into the work that you project to be doing and what the job title is for what you're applying for. Understanding that and understanding what your great success story was, how you got to that place, that it was never a solo journey, Eric. We all know this. It's a team effort no matter what. Did you lead the team? Can you lead from the back of the room? Of course you can. What was your role? Turn it into dollars. What did you learn most from it? What could you do better next time? Likewise, if something did not work as well, and everybody wants to know, yes, where did things go south? And what happened? Did you fall apart? How did you learn from that? What did you do? What were the next steps? If you went in direction A, how would you do it differently? Was your budget on target? Did you not do enough research? How would you have employed the skills that you have, or have you done something different like upskilling? What I learned from this is I needed more information around such and such, so that I took a course, or I read these books, or I learned something in a way that I knew I would be better prepared to contribute the next time, and I would make a difference in a more material way. So for the most part, when there are silly questions, and let's face it, Eric, not every interviewer is a professional. Not every person in HR is. But you have to get through, there's an order. You're going to have phone interviews. Those are preliminary before it gets to anything else. And hopefully these will all turn into something more than that. For mock interviews, you want to know what the job title is, of course. You want to do research online to see what you need to know about the company, what the salary range is. Don't ask about benefits. That's not a good idea. You can find that out in an offer letter. You can find that out as we move along. But we want to know, what is it, where do I stand in this? What is this equal? What is a CFO here instead of a director of finance here? What's the difference? And this research, it's wonderful. The internet gives us all sorts of information. LinkedIn, likewise. Go to LinkedIn. Find out who do you know is connected to someone who works at that company, or can make an introduction, or can fill you in. So what we are trying to avoid are surprises. As far as mock interviews go, and as far as practice in the mirror. It's disconcerting to begin with, but it's a great way to see where your tics are, whether you use your hands too much or not enough, whether you're moving a lot, whether you have a presence that just signifies to me as an interviewer or as a purchaser of your services, or as you're saying, if you're pitching, you want to know that you're getting someplace with this person. So you want to see how you're presenting. Am I professional? Do you have a partner or a friend who can do a mock interview with you, who can throw some curveballs and see how you react? Are you reflective or just responsive? Do you stop? Do you pause? Do you gather yourself and think about, that's a great question, or can you tell me more about that? I'm not certain that I understand exactly what you asked of me. There's nothing wrong with doing that. We had one client who said that's how she went down the rabbit hole, because she was answering something and felt that she was completely out of her comfort zone. And she was.
Yes. I mean, really, I think something you said there, a lot of good things. First off, thank you for that really in-depth answer, and really some specifics, some really meaty details of how you do mock interviews, how you help your clients. And you're right, these tips can really help our listeners tonight who might be in between jobs during this pandemic, might be reapplying for places. It can help our listeners tonight who are themselves employers, and maybe they're actually nervous during interviews and need to work on their interviewing skills, right, to attract good talent. Maybe they're pitching to their clients a new service they have. Maybe they're nervous about the first welcome back meeting of a team of 20 people that they have to now stand in front of and say, hey, welcome to the office. So it's really great, and I think this is like such an important topic. So I'm glad we're discussing it. What jumped out at me, if I may, are a few points. One, I love how you talked about the idea that you can turn, say, a quote unquote failure, or maybe just like, say, a stumbling block in your story in an interview into a positive by saying, acknowledging maybe where you may have made some mistakes, where you're sort of like where you saw, if I'm paraphrasing here correctly, where you saw where you went awry, what you learned from it, how you do it differently this time. I think knowing that can be something you do, or even perhaps ought to do, can help to alleviate the anxiety. The way it's like just taking a deep breath, because I think a lot of people go into situations where they have to speak, and they're in their mind they're rehearsing or worried about the quote unquote failure, or the quote unquote misstep that they're afraid is going to be exposed or uncovered. Like, so, oh, I see in your resume you worked only 4 months at this place, and to come in or to go in as owning that as your strength, to say, yes, this was not one of my better successes. Here's what I learn from it. Here's why I'm grateful that this happened, because it got me to this place where I'm now sitting here in front of you, or something to that effect. I just think that was really powerful. And, I've interviewed like different coaches like over the last, 6 months as guests on the show. And I think it's really the first time I'm hearing someone like yourself give that as a tip. So it's really good. I hope our listeners can own that, take it in. If you've made a mistake and it's going to come out in an interview, spin it into a positive, because we all make mistakes. We're all human. So
We do own it. You make a great point, Eric. It's when we're trying to tiptoe around something and avoid it, it creates greater anxiety. And we know that they know that everybody in the room knows. So why not address it? And let's get it out of the way. And how can we take this and really, really, truly own it as a learning experience? Because we've all had failures. We've all had flaming failures. And those people that run from it, very different than the person who owns it and says, here's something I could have done better. At the time, I didn't have enough information and I went down this road. I could have done better if I had enlisted more help at the time. I could have done better if fill in the blanks. And this is what I learned. So this says to me as a candidate, this is somebody who's curious. This is somebody who's powerful. This is somebody I want to learn more about. And when I want to learn more about you, then that opens up the conversation for other places. How would you handle this? What would it feel like if such and such happened? How would you manage other people? And if you're pitching something, you don't want to feel like you're walking on eggs. You want to feel that there's a connection to whoever it is that you are selling to, buying from, possibly employing, any of those places. But even, Eric, for the simple, whether it's a toast, whether it's in your personal life or your professional life, practice. Practice in the car, practice in the shower, practice when you can. Just get it out there. And for anyone who's doing a program, I always suggest practice the close, practice the beginning, and then practice the middle, so that you really have in your brain, it's programmed into what I need to say, how can I approach it, and how will I conclude? Because we always want the finish to be just as good and powerful as the beginning. Likewise, for candidates, how do you close? Because they're just thinking about, I'm nervous. How do I sell myself? And what does that look like?
Some really good points there, Maureen. Yes, and the more you practice something, the more, the easier it is to access it, rather, to bring it up.
Yes.
Right? Because when you're nervous, sometimes when you're feeling anxiety, and now with this COVID pandemic with transitions, I imagine that every person, who is going back on a train, going into the city, getting used to, let's say, a new commuting schedule, seeing their colleagues for the first time, some may be feeling self-conscious about, you mentioned weight gain or just being out in public again, that anxiety kicks in. And if you have to give a presentation, if you practice enough, even if you're nervous, it'll be easier to recall and bring it up than if you were not.
Absolutely. It's muscle memory. It's again, you created that pathway so that you have the language out there, and you may miss a beat, which is why we don't suggest memorizing anything, but it's really understanding and feeling what is it I want to communicate. If I stumble over a word, it's not the end of the world, but I want to be able to regain. I want to see if there's somebody in the room I can make eye contact with, who I can see there's a friendly face. I can connect with that person more deeply, and I can share my message with that person. So that's a whole other conversation about anxiety. But one thing that's really important, Eric, and women sometimes hate to hear this because, again, it sounds sexist, but smiling is really important. If you can smile and you're creating connection, whether it's the Uber driver or whether it's the person at the front desk, the receptionist is very important, key when you walk in anywhere. We know this. These are the gatekeepers. So you want to make sure that you have good eye contact. You don't have to bring up, flowers and chocolate. What you're looking at here is how I can present properly, how I can show that I am connected, that I might be somebody who could be on a team in this space, working with these people and contribute in a positive way. And I'd be happy to see you.
All really good points, Maureen. And I think this is all really great information, great conversation. It all connects. We have another commercial break, but we'll be back. I'm here with Eric Sarver from Employment Law Today. I'm here with my guest, Maureen Weisner, on Talk Radio NYC. So stick around and we'll be right back.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Are you a small business trying to navigate the COVID-19 related employment laws? Hello, I'm Eric Sarver, employment law, business law attorney, and host of the new radio show, Employment Law Today. On my show, we'll have guests to discuss the common employment law challenges business owners are facing during these trying times. Tune in on Tuesday evenings from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc.
Howdy, I am Joseph Franklin McElroy, host of the new podcast, Gateway to the Smokies. It airs on talkradio.nyc every Tuesday night from 6 p.m. to 7. Every episode is dedicated to memorable experiences in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park and surrounding areas. This show features experts and locals who expound upon the richness of culture, history, and adventure that awaits you in the Smokies. Tune in every Tuesday from 6 p.m. to 7 on talkradio.nyc.
Do you love or are you intrigued about New York City and its neighborhoods? I'm Jeff Goodman, host of Rediscovering New York, a weekly show that showcases New York's history and its extraordinary neighborhoods. Every Tuesday live at 7 p.m., we focus on a particular neighborhood and explore its history, its vibe, its feel, and its energy. Tune in live every Tuesday at 7 p.m. on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sarver, here with my guest tonight, Maureen Weisner, co-founder and managing partner of Kickstart Your Transition. We're talking about some great tips for professional appearance and presentation with Maureen Weisner. For those who may have joined us late, Maureen has given some great tips for some observations first, if you will, about some of the challenges people face during the pandemic and the heightened anxiety around appearance and the awkwardness of being virtual. And then Maureen had some great tips around that regarding, for example, sitting in a stationary chair, practicing, a number of tips around that. And one thing I like that you said, Maureen, which I didn't mention earlier, but it really struck me, that while we have this somewhat of a quote unquote disadvantage of being virtual, there are some advantages too. The fact that you can use your screen to have a post-it over here that says sit up straight, or a poster that says you can do it, little post-it notes that you can't bring in and put on the interviewer's head or jacket, sitting across them in person. So speaking of sitting and presenting, I wanted to ask you, we talked a little bit before the show about this. You mentioned how you mentioned power poses, poses that help you own your power. And, one thing I have to remember when doing the show, sometimes the microphone's a little low, the seat's a little high. So it's easy to sort of slowly go towards the microphone gradually. And then I have to look and see, oh, I'm over here, but I want to be over here. But can you take us through maybe a couple of power poses that you think helps people with their confidence? Yeah?
Absolutely. And just to circle back with another point that you made, Eric, when we're anxious, or not even anxious, when we get off to a rocky start. So for example, I'm not anxious in speaking, but I was muted. So did that take me out of my game? And you just brought me right back in. So there was nothing, and that's how we started. So if I allowed that to inhibit me, or say, oh my goodness, what will the audience think? Here she is, she's a professional coach, and she couldn't even see that she was muted. Mm-hmm. It happens. It's electronic, it's not the end of the world. But as far as getting back into that space and owning the space so that you do feel empowered, so that you do feel, again, whether your testosterone is up, and they couldn't absolutely prove that was true, but cortisol definitely decreases when you're able to take the power pose. So I will be out of the screen if I did the full power pose, but it is a yoga warrior pose. So you want your arms to be up and splayed out, and your feet to be planted firmly on the floor, and just keep your chin up and look up, and just take that in for a moment. So that is one terrific oh, it feels great. And then the other is if you have a desk before you get on the call, feet up and hands behind your head, and you think, wow, I can do this. I've got it. I've absolutely got it. Now, when you're in person, one of the things that we suggest to individuals who are coming into a room for a meeting is get there early, be early and leave late, so that you get in on all of the possible networking that you can, and you can get a feel for what the temperature of the room is, and also to take up your space. For many people, and women in particular, more reluctant to take up a lot of space. But when you spread out, when you just raise your shoulders and you spread out, it automatically takes up more space. So we want to be cognizant of how our bodies are in the room, how we stand, how we are. And one great way to learn about this is improv classes. If you have the opportunity to do it in person, terrific. That will come back too, and it will. But right now you can do it online. And improv classes will give you the confidence to speak very much off the cuff, to create and think about ideas, to fail, to succeed, to have something work with a partner or solo, having ideas thrown at you. It's like being in the fire, in the middle of the fire, and trying to figure out, do I put the fire out or do I go with it? How am I feeling? Am I self-conscious? It's the same thing as learning new things. We recommend to clients, try something new 3 times. So the first time you're probably very uncomfortable, whether it's ice skating or whether it's juggling or whether it's playing the violin. First time you're very uncomfortable. Second time, not so sure. Third time, you'll have a much better idea of whether I like it or not. But it takes a while to get through that space of being self-conscious or embarrassed. Am I good at this? Am I judging myself? Will I ever be good at it? Well, until you practice. Back to practicing again. Never winging it, but practice is really important. Practice makes permanence rather than perfect.
Right. I like that. I like that spin on that saying, because you're right. No one is ever actually perfect, and it makes permanence. It makes things more readily accessible. It's a more of a leeway into success, and those power poses are really something too. Just even the arms up. I thought it really kind of does. It's interesting when I'm about to get on a conference call, staying up with the court or the judge. I try to sit up straight, own my space, or stand up and sort of make the call from a standing position, almost as if I'm commanding or about to give a presentation. And I find the same thing, let's say, with certain clients, when you want to really, as you mentioned, own your power, own your space in a healthy way. And, you made an interesting point a while back about smiling. And I know you said that some women might hear that and take it the wrong way, because it could be, in some different instances, people have said that to women as if like your goal is, right, your job is to look pretty, and sort of take it. But what I hear you saying more is sort of smile to show that you're happy, smile to get into a happy space, smile to project, and also sort of project to others and to yourself that you're okay, and then you connect with other people and they mirror that back to you. Is that sort of the gist of the smile?
I think mirroring is very important, so that we connect with people when we're moving closer into their space, but not too much into their space. When we're mirroring, we're doing the same motions that they're doing. People connect better. So that, yes, and smiling, of course, people respond typically. If you're smiling at them, they typically respond with a smile. So it changes brain chemistry. It changes the way we feel. I feel a different connection to you if you're responding to me in a positive way. So there are lots of cues that we engage in that we're not even aware of, but we want to know what our resting face looks like, which is why the mirror is good. And if you're on a phone call, it's good to have a mirror available so that you can see how you are looking, because that is also projected in the quality of your voice, the pacing of what you're saying, and the sense of, am I connecting with this person? Smile broadly, smile as broadly as you can when you're connecting to your mirror, and see how that feels, because it's generated, the energy absolutely is through the phone.
Absolutely. We're all really good, good points there, Maureen. And we've got about 2 minutes left. So I want to turn the floor over to you and let you just talk for a minute and a half or so about any upcoming events you have. How do we contact you? People want to hire you. Can you?
Oh, thank you, Eric. And I would like to leave also with one exercise that we didn't cover, and that's about quelling anxiety. So if we think about 3 things that we're grateful for, just write it on a Post-it and leave that Post-it someplace. Overwhelmingly, people will say it's friends, family, health, it might be a pet, it might be a job, whatever it is. But if you put those three things, it changes, and you refer to them, it changes the brain chemistry. With respect to what I'm doing, I'm very excited. I am going to be a panelist on Thursday. The Merrimack Valley Women's Conference is their inaugural conference, so it's very exciting. And the panel that I am on is Finding Your Voice, showing up authentic and unafraid. So for, again, professional women in particular, how do you manage interruptions? How do you manage feeling invisible? How do you manage bullying? And all of those instances come from other women as well as from other men. So it's not just a question of being sexist in terms of gender bias. It absolutely is. It happens frequently where somebody will speak over you, somebody will interrupt, you can't get your thoughts out. So it's how to manage that, phrasing that works, and how to get back in your power and get back into a space that works for you. So that's going to start at 8 a.m. on Thursday. We'll put something in the chat for the connection. And I think, Eric, I provided that. We'll figure out how to make people more aware of it. You can reach me at kickstartyourtransition.com. And if you want to email me, it's Maureen at kickstartyourtransition.com. And we can talk. We can do a quick call to find out how I can help you, if our services are a match for you, and if we can help you strategize and move to the next level, whether you're in the job search initially, whether you need a resume, a CV, salary negotiation, interview prep is a big piece of what we do.
Wonderful. Maureen, thank you so much. Really, it was a pleasure to have you on the show tonight, and some really great tips for our guests. Folks, if you like what you saw tonight and heard, tune in Tuesday nights at 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on Talk Radio NYC. You can watch live on Facebook, or you can hear us on the show on the website. I'm Eric Sarver. Have a wonderful night. And Maureen, thank you once again. Everyone,
And thank you, Eric. Have a great night.
You too.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC.